Hi everyone, this is Blake Taylor, and I am reading a not safe for work entry in my tentatively titled Work in Progress, Off the Field. Coleman. That night I decided to play to my strengths when it came to dinner, so I fell back on an old staple of the Coleman diet, ordering pizza and buying beer. The beer served two purposes. First, as a complement to dinner, but also I needed a little bit of liquid courage to ease me into my first night of Memphis lounging around. As I prepared to call Memphis down for the food, a bit of the podcast I had playing on my tablet caught my attention. The female voice broke through all the noise, and I paused to pay attention. More about the flashing display of lights registered throughout the area this week. Experts are claiming that the lights may be the cause of a new outbreak of superhuman afflictions in Thunder County. The flashing lights? Oh yeah. My mind hadn't forgotten that near-death experience on the private jet a few days ago. I mean, I had to say we were pretty lucky. Our plane hadn't crashed, so our lives had moved on. But the subject of the light storm, coupled with the mention of new superpowers popping up, I moved to turn up the volume on my screen when I was interrupted. You didn't have to order pizza. Fuck, I yelled, practically leaping out of my own skin. When I spun around and saw Memphis standing in the doorway, I raised an eyebrow. You just scared the shit out of me. My words caught in my throat as I drank Memphis in. Freshly showered, his dark hair was matted against his forehead. On top of that, the only thing he wore was a form-fitting pair of pajama pants. His speckled pecs and tight stomach glistened. I wanted to lap him up with my tongue. As he pivoted to avoid being cuffed by me, I caught sight of the smooth curve of his ass. Damn, those pants fit perfectly. Sorry, he said, holding up his hands defensively. I thought you heard me come in. I didn't, I replied, and I jump pretty easy. You forget that I'm used to being on my own. I think I need to put a bell on you. Memphis grinned. My eyes wandered further down his chest, following a furry happy trail that curled here and there until it disappeared beneath the waistband of his pajamas. Cap? I blinked and shook my head a few times. Here, I said, handing him a plate. Take what you want. I hope you like meat lovers. If not, I ordered regular. Meat lovers is fine by me, said Memphis. He moved past me, brushing his hairy arm against my side. I never say no to meat. He piled a couple of slices of meat-laden pizza onto his plate. The cheese dripped over his finger, and he gave a sharp breath through his teeth before sucking on it. I watched the way his lips closed around the burned finger and imagined what it would feel like for my rapidly hardening cock to slide in its place. You really didn't have to do this, he said. We could have cooked something together instead, you know. Believe me, I answered. You wouldn't like my cooking. You don't cook? I grinned and piled a slice of pepperoni onto my plate before moving on to the meat lovers. I'm a shit cook. I think the extent of my culinary skills max out at macaroni and cheese, and that's 4-cheese blend, which basically means that I make the instant macaroni and then throw the Mexican blend shredded cheese on top. I know, real classy. Memphis was already digging into his pizza. Then why do you have such an amazing kitchen? He asked, glancing around the room as he chewed. This is a beautiful setup. Seems a shame that it's only for show. Even if I'm not going to use it, I wanted it to look nice, I explained. And, at the time, I thought I might learn how to cook. Eventually. Look at how that turned out. I gave him a face. I just don't have the time. I'm always out for practice, going all out on fast food. Then by the time I get home, I'm exhausted, and then the last thing I want to do is cook for myself. Then there's all the cleanup. I chewed a piece of pepperoni. So, The kitchen is really just for show until I manage to trick a sous chef to come live with me. Memphis finished his first slice and grabbed a beer, cracking it open. "What are you listening to?" he asked, motioning to my tablet. "Ugh, it's just a newscast," I said. "Don't get too worried. I'm not one of those crazy people who has to have it playing in the background all the time. I'm not hanging on their every word. But I like to listen when I'm cleaning around the house or getting something ready. It keeps me up to speed. Anything interesting happening in the world so far?" I raised an eyebrow. "Are you actually interested in the wider world, or are you just humoring me?" "Mostly humoring," Memphis shrugged. He leaned against the counter, and I struggled not to have my eyes glued to his stomach. Every time he flexed, his abs became defined before relaxing back beneath his hair. "Give me the bullet points," he said. "What terrible things are happening today?" I chuckled. "Nothing too terrible, I guess, depending on your point of view. They were talking about that crazy flash of light that everyone saw a couple of days ago." "You mean the one that we flew through?" I nodded. "Apparently, they're saying that that is the source of some new superpowers coming out of the woodwork." Memphis nodded as if this didn't surprise him at all. "They'll look for anything to keep the news cycle going," he said. "It was probably just a burst of lightning. I mean, I doubt that was the actual fabled light storm. I don't feel any different. Do you feel any different?" I set down my plate and reached for a beer. "What do you mean?" I asked. "If that was really the light storm, and it's giving people powers, do you feel like it did anything to you? I mean, I wouldn't mind some super speed, or maybe something to instantly heal my injured leg." The question caught me off guard. I cracked open my beer and took a good long gulp before wiping my beard with the back of my hand. "There's nothing happening with me," I said. "I think if that flash was going to give me powers, I would have noticed by now." I glanced at Memphis, adding, "Why? Were you seriously hoping that you'd get powers?" "I don't know," Memphis shrugged. "They could come in handy, but I guess they're not for everyone. You clearly don't want any." "You're right," I said. "I don't need to mess with any of that. I like my life the way it is. And you know damn well who's going to end up getting those powers. Some entitled jerk who now gets to fly across the country for free, because that's the most common power to pop up." Memphis nodded and finished his beer before taking another, turning the can in his hands. After a couple of moments of awkward silence, I realized that maybe my forceful opinion of supers was a little abrasive, especially since I didn't give him any explanation. I changed the subject. "So what do you want to do for the rest of the night? Is there anything we can do to get to know each other a little bit better?" "A little better? Coleman, I've known you for years now. What else do you need to know about me?" I shrugged. Knowing someone on the field and actually living with them are two different things. "All right, I guess I can humor you, Cap. What do you want to try? 20 questions?" I took a sip of my beer, growing more at ease with every passing moment. "No," I joked. "I was thinking more like we could play spin the bottle." As I had hoped, this got a good laugh out of Memphis. "Sure, Cap," he answered with a good dose of sarcasm. "I think that game is rigged with just two of us, don't you? We need a few more people if we're going to play that. How about we play something else?" Memphis nodded to the doorway leading to the living room. "Your entertainment system seems pretty lonely," he said. "How's about I set up my console and we play some video games together?" A dozen images flashed before my mind at the mention of video games. I was never good at playing video games. Memphis wasn't letting me back down. "Oh, come on, Cap. You gotta give it a shot sometime, especially if you're living with me now. I'll take it easy on you, at least to start." He looked me in the eye with that electrifying sparkle, melting all my protests. "I'll even let you in on a little secret. If all else fails, just mash the buttons. Maybe you'll accidentally get to kick my ass." I held his stare and finished my second beer. "All right," I said. "You're on." That's it for now. This is Blake Taylor. I just want to thank you all for tuning in to the convention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the readings.
The evening air was fresh and cool on Kitty's face as she sprung from rooftop to rooftop looking for witchcraft, a welcome change from the heavy, humid stuffiness that had filled the event hall. The cloying smell of sex still filled her nostrils, and she felt a subtle blush grace her cheeks at remembering seeing her classmates in such a state of indecency. It's not that she was an inexperienced virgin or unfamiliar with the act of sex. Zane Sakibo, otherwise known as the superhero Chasm, had seen to that when they had reunited at Cecilia and Emilio's destination wedding in Miami 3 years ago. But she was definitely long overdue for some sexual satisfaction herself. Despite the awkwardness of it all, seeing and hearing everyone around her in the throes of pleasure had caused the fire to ignite in her own belly. She was extra sensitive to such stimuli after being celibate for so long, and her body had simply reacted accordingly. It was natural, nothing to be ashamed about. Or at least, that's what she tried to tell herself. The appearance of a flash of red on the lawn below snapped Kitty from her daydreaming. Turning quickly, she leapt down to cut off the villain as she made her way towards the street, landing in front of Witchcraft as gracefully as a cat. Going somewhere? Lady Katrina asked, assuming a fighting stance. Witchcraft grinned a wicked grin, revealing her unnaturally sharp teeth. Me? Oh no. I was just waiting for you and the Rogue of Roses to show up. Actually, you're right on time. He should be arriving any second now. Not willing to bank on her partner showing up to help her, Katrina shot off a quick fireball at Witchcraft in an attempt to catch her by surprise. The green-skinned witch deflected it as easily as one swats at a fly. Tisk tisk, Katrina, she chided, raising her staff. I wasn't planning on using my magic on you, but it seems that you want to be my next guinea pig after all. Before Kitty could leap out of the way, Witchcraft's spell struck her directly in the center of her chest, causing the superhero to cry out and fall back onto her rear on the grass from the force of it. At first, she felt fine. Nothing seemed amiss except for the erratic beating of her heart inside of her chest. When she focused, she could still feel Kasha there, her weakened spirit vibrating at a low frequency. Gradually, however, something began to change inside of Kitty. It started with a small pulsing in her womb, her fingers twitching as desire began to course through her veins, and then graduated to shaky legs and abdominal contractions as her body sought the release it craved, her mind becoming hazy and her judgment clouded by unbridled lust. What has she done to me? As if sensing her fears, Witchcraft answered her unspoken question. Don't worry, Katrina, she crooned. My spell only affects soulmates. So, if you're lucky. What is this? Kitty grit out. Is this the undead curse? Oh, no, no, no. All of that voodoo, zombie magic is so 10 years ago. This is something entirely different. A blessing of my own concoction. A gift from me to you. Rhett. I need Rhett. Kitty's body grew hot as thoughts of the man she loved wheeled around her mind. A thin layer of perspiration broke out over her skin, and she felt the moisture that had already started to dampen her inner thighs. She needed to have sex with Rhett, and she needed it now. But Kitty had no idea where he was. She was bound to end up like Serena, crazy with lust and desperate for something to ease the ache at the apex of her legs, even if that something was her own hand. You won't get away with this, Katrina bit out, fighting the urge to cup her own breasts by keeping her fists balled tightly at her sides. You can thank me later. With a final smirk and a wave over her shoulder, Witchcraft leapt into the night. Kitty tried to follow after her, but as soon as she took a step forward, a jolt of burning desire arrowed straight to her core, causing her to moan involuntarily. There was no way she'd be able to save anyone in such a state of animalistic need. Cat? Kitty whipped around to see the rogue crouching behind her at the edge of the lawn, his sultry blue eyes half-lidded and glazed behind his mask. As soon as she set her sights on him, it was like nothing and no one else existed in the world except for him. Time seemed to slow down as all rational thinking seeped out of her brain, her lucidity leaking like a faucet. Even Rhett was forgotten, all thoughts of him cast aside until only one thought remained. She needed to mate with the Rogue of Roses, to become one with him, right there and then out on the grass. She took in his muscular form with a sweep of her eyes, the way his arms and legs and back rippled beneath the black and red leather as he rose to stand, and licked her lips salaciously. She had the urge to taste him, a thought that had never occurred to her prior to this moment. No, it wasn't an urge. It was a craving. Red seemed to respond similarly, his eyes never leaving hers as he raced forward towards her, meeting her in the center of the lawn. Their bodies collided instantaneously in a tangle of limbs as they both grabbed onto each other, wrapping themselves up in one another as though their lives depended on it. Kat grabbed at either side of Red's face, trying to hold herself back and hang on to the fleeting thought that something wasn't right, that she shouldn't want her former partner this way, that they had a job to do, and that job didn't involve ripping their clothes off and fucking each other senseless. But the thought was gone just as quickly as it had come once Red had smashed his lips to hers in a hungry kiss. The last of her willpower melted away, leaving her consumed by an all-encompassing need for the dashing Rose City rogue to touch her everywhere. Please don't stop me, Kat, he pleaded against her lips. The need in his voice almost caused Kitty to moan out loud. You don't know how long I've wanted you like this. Even if she wanted to, Katrina was powerless to stop him. Witchcraft's spell over her was too strong. She wanted him badly. Don't stop, Red, the lusty superheroine panted, her own voice thick with desire. Please, don't stop. With a dagger pulled from his breast, the rogue trailed a line down the front of Katrina's suit, slicing it cleanly in half. It parted to reveal her pert breasts and taut stomach to him, and she wasted no time in shuffling out of it completely. She stood exposed in front of her partner, as naked as the day she was born except for her mask, reveling in the way that his eyes darkened upon seeing her nudity. You're so beautiful, Kat, he breathed, drinking in the sight of her. With one step forward, their mouths were colliding again, tongues twirling and sliding over one another as Kat raked her fingers through Red's unruly tresses. She was desperate for anything to hold on to keep herself from floating away. His kisses were intoxicating, fueling the fire that burned within her with every flick and swirl of his tongue inside of the moist cavern of her mouth. In turn, Red reached up to palm her breasts. First one, and then the other, massaging them and pinching each sensitive, rosy bud of her nipples until they hardened beneath his fingertips. The sensation drove Kat insane. Red, she whined, his nickname for her long-lost partner with tangible, animalistic, unabashed need. She didn't have to say anything further. He knew what she needed from him. Carefully, he laid her down on her back in the grass, her dark hair fanning out behind her head like a halo, and pecked her once on the lips before leaving a fiery trail of kisses down her body. He paused briefly to suckle on each of her stiff nipples, stopping only once he'd reached the spot between her thighs. His hot breath ghosted over her sex, and Kitty shuddered. Spread your legs for me, my lady, he commanded gently. She did as she was bid without hesitation, coveting more of his mouth on her. He dove in without restraint, lapping at her like a cat lapping at a bowl of milk, causing Katrina to cry out and fist her hand in his hair, anchoring herself. She tasted like the most succulent custard, sweet and creamy and musky, and he found that he couldn't get enough. He rubbed his face back and forth across her sex as he ate, coating his mouth and chin and cheeks in her delicious essence. He dipped his tongue around her velvet folds and inside of her opening, and Kat keened, bucking her hips up against his inciting mouth. The firm, flexible muscle prodded at her bundle of nerves and lathed her slit in frenzied strokes, bringing her close to the edge, close enough to burst. Had anything ever felt so good before? But still, she needed more. The urge to couple with the Rogue of Roses was too great to think about anything else, including the repercussions of such an act. Her lust for him engulfed her senses until her skin was hot all over and she was burning in hellfire to have him inside of her. Please, she whimpered, tugging on Red's hair. He released her nether lips from his mouth and brought his face up to hers, kissing her passionately, allowing Kat to taste herself. She broke the kiss with a gasp. She swore she would die soon if he didn't get inside of her right that moment. The spell was so powerful that it was nearly painful. Please, Red, I need you to fuck me.
This is Ryder O'Malley reading Irresistible Power, prequel to The Men of Vanguard. Boy, you look like you got caught with your pants down at your family reunion. My jaw dropped. It's rare that somebody could render me speechless. The man behind the bar was sharp as a tack. With a brief flash of my middle finger, I pointed at the tap. Mickey laughed, a roar that filled the small room. Mick, keep the glass full. I need to make some bad decisions tonight. I needed to take my mind off the coffee shop. At the rate things were going, I'd drop dead from the stress before the landlord locked the doors. If ever there was a place to shirk responsibilities, it was at Bottoms Up, the local dive bar. It wasn't a coincidence that I came on leather night. If I was going to be distracted, might as well be by shirtless men in harnesses showing off chest tattoos. Still no luck? Mick set the pint down, careful to put the glass on a small napkin, like it was a classy joint. I shook my head before taking a swig that half emptied my beer. Nope, nothing. I do not know what to do. Remember when Connor's Bakery almost shut down? Didn't that slumlord jack up his rent and then sell the building out from under him? Yup. We took up a collection to get him back on his feet. Chad, the community will help you. I appreciated the support. I really did. However, if I couldn't succeed on my own, perhaps it wasn't meant to be. I thought about going from barista to the owner. Thought it would be a simple transition. Seriously, how hard could it be? A younger me needed a smack in the face. Thanks, Mick, but I need to figure this one out for myself. The man reached across the bar, gave me a pat on the cheek. We don't succeed by ourselves. You've got friends. I took his hand, giving it a squeeze. Mick was a great guy, and more than happy to put himself on a limb to help the other nearby businesses. The solution to the problem was somewhere in my head, but I couldn't quite find it. I needed time, the one luxury I didn't have. I switched topics before I drove myself crazy. Did you catch the Hero app this morning? I was barely out of bed when the ruckus started. I wish Zipper would slow down so I could see the action. He took out Lit in a blink of an eye. Everybody loved talking about local heroes. I couldn't blame them. They were regular folks with extraordinary abilities. For all I knew, Mick could be the Zipper. Well, not with how slowly he refilled my glass. I tapped the rim. He gave me a scowl. What about the other guy? The one in blue. The app has him listed as a new hero, but there isn't anything except a few cell phone photos. Supervillains had become a problem in our city. Their numbers continued to grow, and the local police force depended on the heroes. But despite the rise of villains, there weren't enough good guys to go around. The Centurions focused on saving the planet from intergalactic threats, not stopping petty theft. The neighborhood needed more folks like the Zipper and his newfound sidekick. Mick filled my glass, placing it on a fresh napkin. I don't know who he is, but he traded blows with Thundra. You can tell he's green. You know how they always go into that villain speech? Seriously, why do they do that? He stopped and listened. Could have spared us a monologue. When he knocked some sense into Thundra, it was impressive. I'm glad to see we have another hero nearby. Then maybe my bank won't get robbed on a weekly basis. Your bank, Mick? Last time I went to the grocery store, Winter King put up a wall of ice, trapping me in the candy aisle. I was on my third family-sized bag of M&Ms when I got rescued. Whoever he is, I appreciate another hunk in a tight suit saving the day. I laughed at the bartender. You're such a hero chaser. The cock wants what the cock wants. I couldn't blame the man. There was something alluring about a man in a leather suit. Not knowing his actual identity, the lack of strings, it had its perks. I'd peel the uniform off that new hero and see what he was packing. Speaking of, Mick gave a slight nod of the head, signaling further down the bar. There's a man in a harness checking you out. I know, I'm a good-looking guy. I've got a brilliant smile, and a beard helps me look my age. Granted, I could stand to lose a few pounds, but who wants a six-pack when you can tap a keg? With a quick glance, I could see the man at the pool table at the rear of the bar, just shy of licking his lips. Details. I raised my glass, drinking until it ran empty. I've seen him before in here. He's straight to the point, pleasant, acts like he's all top, but I know his type. He'd be on all fours begging for it before you dropped your zipper. The leather-clad bear gave me a quick wave, beckoning me to join him at the pool table. He held up a pool stick and pointed at me. I gave a slight nod while sliding off my stool. It looked like I found my bad decision for the night. I had some pent-up frustration I'd gladly take out on this sexy man. Reaching into my wallet, I dropped money on the counter for Mick and gave him a quick salute. He rolled his eyes before offering last-second advice. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Exactly. I had never met the man before. Reaching into his jeans, he found I didn't need any encouragement. I had been stiff for the last hour while we played a game of pool filled with coy innuendos. The stall in the bar had been the destination for many eager men, unwilling to wait until they got home. For a dive, Mick had an immaculate touch in the bathroom, almost as if he knew what was going to occur here several times a night. The leather-clad bear squeezed my cock while I leaned against the wall, savoring the firm grip. When he had nodded to the bathroom, it took away the mystery of how I was going to get him naked. The copious amounts of liquid courage overrode my common sense. I followed. The other patrons of the bar watched, smirks revealing they knew what was about to transpire. My fingers traced the muscles down his chest, following the dark treasure trail leading into his leather pants. I slid my palm across the outline of his cock and pressed at the hardness. I reached for his zipper, and he stopped my hand. If he wanted this to be a one-sided affair, I wouldn't object. I had a week's worth of frustration that needed unloading. He jerked my cock quickly, nearing the point of no return. The way he bit his lower lip while locking eyes, I suspected he'd be less than thrilled to waste my load. Mick had been right. My friend might be present as all top, but he was a submissive bottom needing to serve. It was exactly the relaxation I needed. Take it out, I commanded. Yes, sir. He broke eye contact, turning his attention toward my pants. He fumbled with my button until he unfastened my jeans. When he pulled my zipper down, I could feel the cool air against my boxer briefs. He took a step back, inspecting my bulge, entranced by my cock, the cock he was about to service. I gave it a flex and he reached inside, pulling my package free, proudly on display and pointing skyward. His fingers wrapped around the base, leaving the last few inches exposed. I let out a content sigh. My hips bucked involuntarily as my cock thickened, trying to fuck his hand. I would have let the man jerk me off until I shot my load on the bathroom floor, but as he licked his lips, I knew what he wanted from this arrangement. On your knees. Look, I'm not a dominant guy in the bedroom, but if that's what my partner needs to get his jollies, I'd gladly play the role. Yes, sir. He opened his mouth, ready to swallow my cock, but I stopped him short, a hand on his head keeping his lips just out of reach. I could feel his breath against my skin, and I wanted nothing more than to bury my cock in his throat. Men like him needed somebody in control. It was a game of denying him what he wanted and only allowing him to proceed when it suited me. It just so happened I needed a mouth. My hand slid to the back of his head, pulling him forward. My back arched as his lips circled around the head of my cock. But it wasn't enough. I continued pulling until I could feel his tongue run along the underside of my shaft. As I hit the back of his throat, my hips lurched forward until I pushed past the bend, his face buried in my crotch. Good boy, I muttered. The stress of the coffee shop had faded away. Nothing mattered but this man intent on making me come. His hands pulled at my jeans until he grabbed my ass. Despite being in a public bathroom, I moaned loud enough that the patrons near the pool table got a sample of the man's talents. He slid back, gasping for air. Before I could react, he returned to the base of my cock. It's a mutual transaction. He's getting exactly what he wanted. I grabbed the sides of his head and bucked my hips. Each time I thrust, his lips clamped down, his tongue pushing against my cock. This wouldn't be a long exchange. His nails bit into my backside, the perfect mix of pain and pleasure, making me even more eager to unload. There is an art to a blowjob. The right amount of pressure, speed, and depth. This man slobbering on my cock had a master's degree in head, and he wasn't far from obtaining his PhD. I was content being his research subject as the tingling started in my groin. He guided my hands to the back of his head, giving me the cue to take over the tempo. I proceeded with quick jabs, making sure his tongue hit the sweet spot in the middle of my shaft. He stuck with it, determined to receive his reward for a job well done. When I caught him reaching into his pants, gripping his own cock, I lost it. The tingling turned into a wave, starting from my cock and spreading through my body. I trembled as he forced his way all the way to the base, greedily swallowing. His hands on my ass pulled tighter, ensuring he wouldn't miss a drop. I fell against the wall, savoring the moment. When he came up for air, he gave my cock a squeeze with his hand, and a dribble of cum appeared. His brown eyes fixed on mine as he leaned in, his tongue licking the last drop. "Thank you, sir," he said. "Good boy," I said, giving him a light pat on the cheek.
This is Trish Heinrich, and I will be reading from the first book in my Celestial Superheroes series, Devil's Temptation. Now, to set up the scene, Tessa is an investigative reporter, and she is looking for a thumb drive that the big bad villain fiend wants. And it just so happens to be in a storage facility of one of her friends. And Nathan, who is our hero, is also looking for the thumb drive. And Tessa doesn't know that Nathan is actually the Silver Devil. And so in this scene, Tessa is trying to break into the storage facility, which is one of those big open air type of things where there's sheds, individual sheds that you go into. And who should she meet there but Silver Devil himself? So let's see what happens. I took a deep breath and started entering the first possible code into the keypad. As I finished, the keypad beeped at me, but it didn't unlock the door. I sighed. 1 down, 3 to go. And if I didn't have it by then, I would need to get creative, because after 4 attempts, it would trigger an alarm. But knowing Justine like I did, she only ever used one of 4 combinations, and even those she sometimes had a hard time remembering. The second code gave me the same result, and I started entering the third possibility when I heard a shout nearby. My stomach dropped and my fingers flew over the keypad. I didn't know if I hit a wrong number or if it wasn't the correct sequence, but it beeped at me again. "Come on," I whispered, sweat dripping down my back. The voice was getting closer, accompanied by someone else. I had no idea if they worked here or if they rented a shed, but I really didn't care. Either way, I was a woman at a storage facility in the middle of the night, and things could go bad. I entered the only other option and had the same result. No, no, no. I was about to run, even though whomever it was would likely hear my footsteps at this distance, when a pair of large hands pulled me up and off my feet. I squeaked in shock and looked up into the dark eyes of none other than Silver Devil. He pulled me up onto the roof of the shed, and I wasn't sure how that was better, exposed and as high up as we were. He pressed his finger to where his lips would likely be under the cloth that covered the bottom half of his face, and I nodded. With one arm, he pressed my back to his front. Then his wings came around us, extinguishing any light. "It's going to be all right," he whispered. I nodded, a heart in my throat. "I swear I saw someone around here," said a raspy-voiced man. "Boss said to call if anyone came near any of her stuff," said a second. Silver Devil's arm tightened around my middle, as if to reassure me. I leaned against him and put my small hand over his massive one. It helped to have his strength all around me. Not to mention his wings. Oh my God, his wings are absolutely huge. "We better check it out all the same," said raspy voice. "Damn it, I wanted to get a pint before the bar closed." The darkness within the wings deepened, and the world went absolutely black. I gasped in shock, unable to even recognize if my eyes were open or shut. "It's all right," he whispered. "Stand still." I tried, but there was a new level of terror starting to rise within me. He wasn't just angelic. He could summon the dark to hide in. Every nightmare under every child's bed had this ability. And in those stories, that monster wasn't the good guy. But this isn't a bedtime story. This is real. And he's not a monster. The monster is Fiend. I can trust Silver Devil. Can't I? I closed my eyes and just concentrated on the warmth of his body pressed against me, his hand on my stomach, and the way his fingers were now entwined with mine. The voices outside of the shadowy bubble faded, the sound of their feet getting further and further away. After a second or two, I slumped against him and let out a sigh of relief. The dark dissipated, but the wings were still encircling us. I looked at him over my shoulder, about to tell him he could let me go, when his eyes bored into mine, and I was frozen. He was bent down. His face was so close to mine that I could see the outline of his mouth under the half mask, the purple threads of light dancing in his dark eyes. His wings cocooned us in a private little space, cut off from everything else. All thoughts of why I was in this predicament to begin with flew right out of my head. There was nothing except him and me. That was close, I whispered. Yes. His fingers found the space between my yoga pants and shirt and were brushing back and forth on my bare skin. It was such a small thing, but all my focus went to where he was touching me, the way his calluses felt against my stomach. You always seem to be here when I need you, I whispered. And do you? He asked after a moment. Need me? I grinned up at him, my fingers brushing against the mask. Why do I get the impression you're not asking about life or death situations? In the dim light, I saw him swallow. I could feel him breathing, fast and ragged against me. I felt something very large press against my back, and realized with no small amount of surprise that it was his cock. I licked my lips, trying desperately to get a handle on the things my body wanted to do. I wanted to press my body into his arousal and make him groan. I wanted his fingers to dip under the top of my pants and feel how wet I was already. I wanted him to want me with as much desperation as I did him. Can I take this off? My fingers grazed his mask. He sucked in a sharp breath through his teeth and pressed me harder against him. A soft moan escaped my lips before I could stop myself. If you take that off, he said, breathy and strained. What then? I want you to kiss me. Tessa, I want you to touch me and take whatever you want, I said, surprised at the words coming out of my mouth. I want you. Then I did press myself against his cock, and when he groaned, low and deep in his throat, I swear my clit trembled. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I moved his fingers just under the waistband of my yoga pants and saw his eyes widen. I know what I want. I moved them further down. The question is, do you want it? His cock pressed harder into me as his fingers slowly traveled lower. I felt like a string drawn tight, ready to break at the slightest pressure as he teased the top of my panties, dipping under and out. If I do what you want, his voice was low, as if he were holding himself back by the slimmest margin. If I fuck you with my fingers right here under the night sky, what then? My breath caught at the thought of him doing that to me, and I tried very hard to think about what he was asking. It was a reasonable question. Unless, of course, you're horny as fuck and you got a very hot, extremely well-endowed celestial ready to participate in your filthiest fantasies. I don't know, I admitted. I just want you, that's all. Tessa. He whispered my name like a plea. But was he pleading with me to stop this and release him from whatever spell I'd cast? Or was he asking if I really wanted this? And that's the end of my reading. If you want to find out what happens, you can pre-order Devil's Temptation on Amazon. And you can go to my website, www.trishheinrich.com, to find the link to pre-order the first book in the Celestial Superhero series. Thank you so much for listening to me read a little snippet of my upcoming novel, and enjoy the rest of the convention.